It was a typical Thursday afternoon at the courthouse in downtown Southview. The large, gray stone building, usually bustling with activity, had a sense of quiet anticipation hanging in the air. People shuffled through the halls, either preparing for their cases or waiting for their turn in front of the judge. Among them was Tanya Brown, a black woman in her early 30s, dressed in a crisp navy suit and carrying the weight of a case that had become far more than just legal proceedings. It was now a matter of principle. Tanya had been fighting for justice after being wrongfully accused of theft by a major retail corporation. The company had claimed that Tanya had stolen merchandise, but the evidence was thin at best, and there were glaring inconsistencies in their accusations. Nevertheless, they had decided to take the case to court, hoping that the sheer weight of their resources would scare Tanya into settling. Tanya, however, was no pushover. She had fought hard to get to this point, hiring a lawyer who was known for his tenacity and his commitment to fairness. They were prepared to go to trial and expose the company's lies, but what they weren't prepared for was what happened when they entered the courtroom. Judge Raymond Caldwell was notorious in legal circles. Though his reputation for bias was well known, he had somehow managed to retain his position on the bench for years. Caldwell was a man who was used to power. He ruled with an iron fist, often making offhand remarks that left a bad taste in the mouths of those who came before him. His courtroom was a place where the rich and powerful could often count on a favorable verdict, while the vulnerable and marginalized were left to fend for themselves with little hope. As Tanya and her attorney, Michael Rodriguez, entered the courtroom, they were greeted by the usual signs of the judge's domineering presence. The room fell silent as Caldwell took his seat at the bench, his stern face betraying little emotion. Tanya could feel the tension in the air, the kind that always seemed to accompany the judge's arrival. "Ms. Brown, I trust you're ready to proceed," Judge Caldwell said, his voice dripping with condescension. Tanya straightened up. "Yes, Your Honor. We're ready to begin." The trial started without much incident, but it quickly became clear that Caldwell was not impartial. He allowed the prosecution to present weak evidence and gave their witnesses far more leeway than he had given Tanya's defense team. Tanya's attorney, Michael, raised objections, but Caldwell dismissed them with a wave of his hand, as though the very idea of being challenged was an inconvenience. But it wasn't until the mid-afternoon break that things took a turn for the worse. During a recess, Tanya and her attorney were speaking privately when Judge Caldwell approached them. "Ms. Brown," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You might want to just settle this case. It's clear you don't have a leg to stand on, and I'm sure the court would appreciate you not wasting everyone's time." Tanya, already feeling the sting of the judge's dismissive attitude, stood up straight and looked him in the eye. "I'm not here to settle. I'm here for justice, and I'm not leaving until I get it." Judge Caldwell's face contorted into a sneer. "Justice?" he laughed bitterly. "Justice for someone like you? Let's be real, Ms. Brown. People like you are always looking for a handout. Maybe it's time you learned your place." The courtroom fell silent. Those who overheard the exchange began to shift uncomfortably, but none of them spoke out, afraid, as always, of the power that Judge Caldwell wielded. Tanya's face reddened with anger, but she kept her composure. She wasn't going to let him belittle her. "I don't need your charity, Your Honor. What I need is for you to do your job and rule fairly. I'm not here to be disrespected by you or anyone else." The judge's face twisted in fury. "How dare you speak to me like that?" he spat. "I am the one who holds the power in this courtroom. You will show respect, or you will regret it." It was then that Tanya did something that no one in the courtroom expected. She stood up and walked to the front of the room, facing the judge directly. "I've had enough of this," she said, her voice steady and unwavering. "I'm not going to let you intimidate me. I'm not going to let you treat me like I don't matter. I'll fight for justice no matter what." Judge Caldwell's face turned crimson with rage. "You're out of line, Ms. Brown. I'll have you removed from this courtroom immediately." But just as he made the motion to have Tanya escorted out, something unexpected happened. The courtroom doors swung open, and two uniformed officers stepped in. They were not there to remove Tanya, they were there for Judge Caldwell. Before anyone could react, the officers approached the judge, and one of them spoke. "Judge Caldwell, you are under arrest for misconduct and abuse of power. You have been accused of taking bribes in exchange for favorable rulings, as well as making discriminatory comments to litigants. You're coming with us." The room erupted in shock. People gasped, some even applauded, as the officers placed handcuffs on Judge Caldwell. His face, usually so full of arrogance, now looked pale and vulnerable. "What is this nonsense?" he yelled, struggling against the officers. "This is absurd. I'm a judge. You can't do this." But the officers were unyielding, and within moments, Caldwell was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, his career in ruins. As the courtroom settled down, Tanya stood in silence for a moment, processing what had just happened. She had gone from feeling powerless to witnessing the very man who had tried to tear her down be held accountable for his actions. It was surreal, but it was also a victory, for her, for the system, and for everyone who had ever been marginalized by the very people meant to uphold the law. Michael, her attorney, was the first to speak. "Tanya, I can't believe this." "I can," she said quietly, a small smile on her lips. "I've always believed that justice would prevail. It's just a matter of time." The courtroom, once a place of intimidation and fear, was now filled with a sense of hope. The power dynamics had shifted. The corrupt judge who had thought he was untouchable had finally been held accountable. And as Tanya walked out of the courtroom, her head held high, she knew that this was only the beginning of her fight, for herself, for justice, and for everyone who had ever been silenced by the system. In the days that followed, the news of Judge Caldwell's arrest spread like wildfire. It became a symbol of the fight against corruption and racism in the justice system. People across the country rallied behind Tanya, praising her bravery in standing up to a man who had abused his power for far too long. The trial against the retail corporation also gained new momentum, as the public's sympathy now lay squarely with Tanya. Tanya had come to court seeking justice, and, in the end, she had gotten much more than that. She had brought down a corrupt judge and inspired a movement that would carry on long after her case had concluded. The corrupt judge was no longer the one who controlled the courtroom. Tanya Brown had proven that justice, even when fought for with everything you have, could still win. And for the first time in a long time, she could finally breathe easy, knowing that the system had, at least in one instance, worked as it was supposed to.